Welcome back to She Talks Green. Today's episode brings us to the heart of India's fields, farms, and food systems. Because if there is one sector where the climate crisis is already playing out every single day, it is agriculture. The sector is already bearing the brunt of climate change. Rising temperatures, erratic monsoons, and shifting pest and disease patterns, a constant reminder of just how unpredictable and unforgiving our climate has become for more than 120 million smallholder farmers who feed this country. But why should this matter to you and me? Because when farmers struggle with water shortages, rising input cost, or crop losses, it affects everything from the prices of vegetable in our markets to our household budgets, rural jobs, and the strength of India's economy. In fact, in August 2024, the RBI bulletin flagged climate change as a growing force behind food inflation in India, calling it endemic. So, how do we get this right? How do we build systems that reduce emissions, protect farmers, and secure our food and water future all at the same time? To unpack this, I am joined by one of India's most respected agricultural economists and policy voices, Dr. Ashok Gulati. In this conversation, we will get real about what it will take for India's agriculture sector to not just survive, but lead in a changing climate. Welcome to She Talks Green, sir. It is an absolute privilege to have you with us today. I want to begin with what we are seeing on the ground. India's farmers are already living the reality of climate change. India faced record breaking heat waves. We have seen crazy temperatures going up to 50 degrees Celsius, not just last year, but even this year, which has led to crop failures and loss of working hours. In between 2015 and 2021, India lost nearly 69 million hectares of crops due to excessive rain and drought. Climate change and food insecurity have become the most critical challenges of the century. So, can you please explain the most pressing ways climate change is impacting agricultural production and farmers' livelihoods in India?
Well, thank you for having me on your show. It's very clear that climate change is hitting agriculture directly and many other sectors also. Uh, Europe is taking much proactive stand on this, although US has literally backed out that this is the biggest hoax of the century. Uh, but all said and done, since we are in the southern hemisphere and temperatures are going, as you said, up to 50 degree. Normally, let's say different crops react to increasing heat differently. Uh, if there is a 1 week heat wave in February, when the wheat crop is in the process of making grains, we will lose 5% of wheat with 1 degree higher heat temperature. 1 degree centigrade higher temperature means 5% of wheat gone. And this is within 1 week, it can be done. Now, how government is reacting to it, how farmers are reacting to it, there's a lot of work that the government is doing on heat resistant varieties. And in fact, Prime Minister has released some of them, and ICAR Director General tells me 60 to 70% of the area under wheat now is under heat resistant varieties. So that's why, despite the increasing heat, you are not seeing any major drop in the production. Whether rice or wheat, rice stocks, we are the largest rice exporter in the world today. Out of 61 million tons of global exports, 20 million ton is by India. And even for wheat this year, our procurement production is very much comfortable. So, all said and done, yes, there is a danger and alarming signs on certain things, but there is also coping strategies on the way. And so far, we don't have really experienced that we have to import 20 million tons of grains. Okay, so that's the story. So there is a negative part, but there is an action already underway, and scientists are working on this. Government is putting some priority on that. More can be done always, but situation is not as alarming that there will be a famine and India's we will have to import 20, 30 million tons of food grains. That's not the situation, at least for the next 5, 10 years.
So while we'll of course discuss how we, what more we can do in the agriculture sector to make it more climate responsive, I will also talk about, agriculture being also a reason to contributing to emissions, which is also a big part of the problem. Now, uh, if we don't tackle it, of course, it will be adding fuel to fire. And that brings me to methane and sustainable farming, particularly. So, we know methane is really a potent greenhouse gas, much more harmful and powerful than carbon dioxide. And we are the third largest emitter of methane globally. A big chunk of that comes from agriculture, accounting for some 48 percentage, and especially from livestock. So, since farmers are already facing such huge challenges, how do we strike a balance between reducing these emissions and then protecting farmers' livelihoods as well?
Very important. Uh, let's see, globally, agriculture contributes about 23, 24% over the of the greenhouse gas emissions. But in India, despite being quite a large agriculture base, our emissions are only 13% of the total emissions being generated in the system. Our emissions are largely coming from the energy, the coal, thermal, particularly. So there is much more action on energy transition. That's the government policy also, moving from thermal to renewables and so on and so forth. But for the next 10 years, 15 years, we don't have escape from thermal. We will keep on until, and then the vehicular pollution that is increasing, more prosperity, 5 million cars if you are producing every year. Then there is, so you need to have a transition there also towards, but if the charging, the power that you are using for your vehicles for charging is also coming from thermal power, then you don't solve the problem as much. Anyway, that is the non-agriculture part. Within the agriculture part, there are two basic culprits. One is the livestock, and the other is rice cultivation. Rice, actually, in Punjab, Haryana belt, if you go right now, and it's all flooded fields, they are generating all methane. So these are ponds of methane. It's an ocean of methane. And methane is 80 times more polluting than the carbon dioxide. That's the equivalence. But what people are not realizing is that when you put 250 kilograms of fertilizers on top of that, and plant is consuming only 35 to 40% of that urea, in particular the granular urea that you are spreading, the rest is going in the environment as nitrous oxide. And nitrous oxide is 273 times the carbon dioxide. So that gets added. So there is methane, then there is nitrous oxide, then of course the machinery has to work, so carbon dioxide comes from the machinery, harvest combines and all that. And on top of that, there is stubble burning, which is again carbon. Okay, so you have four layers of polluting the air and emitting greenhouse gas emissions in rice cultivation. And why we are doing so much of rice cultivation? As I said, we are the largest exporter, and our rice stocks with the Food Corporation of India are 3 to 4 times the buffer stock norms. So we are overproducing rice, polluting environment, and the reason for that is only this: there is free electricity, and there is highly subsidized urea. So, if these two policies, one by the center, one by the state, can be challenged and reformed and repurposed, then I think if you create crop neutral incentive structures, pulses, oilseeds don't need that much of fertilizer, they don't need that much of water. So you will save all the electricity subsidy and you will save all the fertilizer subsidy. But that saving, which today the Punjab farmers get about 39,000 rupees per hectare is the subsidy on rice cultivation. Now, if you give even 35,000 rupees to the pulse growers or oilseeds producers, and say per hectare we will give you this, then the viability gap funding between the profitability of rice versus pulses, then there is a chance that farmers will wean away from rice cultivation, and therefore methane and all the greenhouse gas emissions can be reduced from rice. But the larger chunk is coming from the livestock sector. And livestock sector, we have the largest population, not just of humans on this planet, but we have the largest cattle population also on this planet, more than 300 million cattle. Half of them are literally unproductive today because with the tractorization and farm machinery, hardly people are using the bulls, right? So, and because of the religious constraints and feelings, you cannot cull them. As a result, I think we need to be very careful and choose. Nowadays the technology is AI, artificial insemination, not just artificial intelligence, but artificial insemination in livestock sector. But there is a technology where you can sort out the sex semen. Okay, so you can have 90% probability that only a cow will be born out of that rather than a male, which is not needed today, right? So you can have lesser population of the cattle, but more productive, which is the male. There is a, female preference, at least in the dairy sector, for that. So you can do that type of a, but there is also diet change that cattle need. If you are giving them just wheat chaff, you're not putting enough protein or pulses or other things. There is a technology in the feed balanced diet. If you can use seaweeds, for example, in the diet of the cattle, then you can reduce methane emissions from the cattle. So you need to rebalance the diets of the cattle. Also look for that unproductive cattle can be avoided, and those cattle which are roaming on the roads uh, need to be put under a shelter, whether you call it gaushala or whatever. And then those have to be made into a business proposition so that their waste, uh, the dung, can be, at a scale can be created into a manure, which must be put into the farmers' fields along with the chemical fertilizers. So that chemical fertilizers don't create that much of acidity and don't destroy the soil as much. So it's a combination of organic and inorganic fertilizers that is needed. And we can use this, which are roaming around, sort of unproductive, unwanted, into a business proposition. So you need change in policies, change in priorities, and some action has to take place with some resource funding to start with.
I think so. You obviously explained it really well and touched upon some important factors, which I will, I think, pick one by one. Since you spoke about subsidies, and that is also linked to sustainable farming, another issue that we are seeing is the water crisis in farming. There are several reports suggesting that India could see a 16% drop in food production because of water stress. Now, linked to this is, of course, the subsidy issue that you just said, that there are several subsidies that have been provided. Sometimes it ends up being counterproductive from a sustainability perspective. What is your take on this, and how should subsidies be restructured to encourage sustainable practices?
Yeah. Uh, Groundwater situation in India in certain pockets is very alarming. Punjab and Haryana are the worst. Uh, in both these pockets, about for the last 25 years, water table is going down by 1.5 feet every year. 1.5 feet every year, the water table is going down in Haryana and Punjab. Reason is paddy cultivation. And paddy cultivation is more remunerative because of the subsidization of power, it's a free power. And then, of course, fertilizer subsidy and fertilizer consumption in this belt is about 250 kilograms per hectare. So, as I was saying, if you create crop neutral incentive structures, we calculated that subsidy on rice cultivation is about 39,000 rupees per hectare. Now, if you give 35,000 rupees to a pulse grower or a oilseed grower, you can bring back a diversity and save your water table. Farmer is concerned with his profitability. He is not giving as much priority to environmental concerns. Unfortunately, even the government that is supposed to take care of this, they are on the first thing that the political parties promise is, oh, free power. They don't know they are doing the biggest damage to peasantry by giving free power. Right? The water table. Peasants' profits have to be protected, but also planet's concerns of groundwater and air and soil and biodiversity, they also need to be protected. If we cannot combine the two, we have failed in making rational policies. Okay, these policies of high subsidization have a legacy when the food security was a major concern. Now, food security in terms of availability of food is not an issue anymore in the country. It is more nutrition that is needed, and pulses are more nutritious than paddy. But what is the price and what is the subsidy they give to pulses? And then, of course, R&D has to be there to increase the productivity of pulses. But all these things, there is a repurposing of the subsidies, particularly on fertilizer and food. You are giving rice and wheat in the public distribution system to more than 800 million people, almost free rice and wheat. And then you ask them, oh, you consume millets. Who is going to consume millets when you're giving rice and wheat free? So it's only a little fad of the people. So those policies are not in sync with each other. You give them food coupons and say that you can buy these 20 things out of this. That can be pulses, that can be oil seeds, that can be milk, that can be eggs, which is much more nutritious. So you have to change the policy. You are spending more than 2 lakh crores every year on food subsidy. And interestingly, I must say here, when your surpluses are in Punjab, Haryana belt, that is where the maximum procurement takes place. They are overusing urea, that is nitrogen. Do you know that overuse of nitrogen is causing not just diabetes and thyroids, and underusing zinc is causing stunting amongst children below the age of 5. So our crops have become deficient in zinc, wheat and rice in particular, and that is leading to stunting on one side. And then the polluted groundwater, which has nitrate content, is leading to cancer. So these subsidies are becoming lethal because We cannot envision how to get out of this so-called food security syndrome. We need better nutrition and better policies which can give us balanced diets and better nutrition and save us from cancer, from diabetes, from thyroids, and zinc deficiency. Okay? So, all this is on the table for the governments of the day to do. And solutions are not very difficult. You want to help the poor, give them food coupons and list them 20 commodities and let them buy from any cooperative store or Shuffle or other places, other depots and all that, and make convert those PDS shops into nutrition shops.
Right. Absolutely. I think, sir, you brought a very important dimension to this discussion, which is unfortunately not often discussed in the mainstream narratives, which is nutrition deficient food that we have, sort of made our peace with. And I think that's a very important aspect to also think and work on when we work through policies, because that's a consequence, that's a huge impact to public health in India. I'll come to more policy focused discussion, but since you mentioned about some of the solutions, technology that we have at our disposal, which are honestly very easy to sort of implement also. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that in this context. That how big a role do you see technologies bridging the productivity gap and helping farmers adapt also? We have seen something very recently, which is Maharashtra Maha Agri AI policy, several agri hackathons also happening. Globally, there's a lot of excitement around precision farming, AI based analytics, climate resilient seeds and crops like millets, though, of course, how much it is being adapted is still a question to be asked. So, how are these innovations, playing out? How accessible it is for smallholder farmers in India, particularly?
You have to look at the concerns of the peasant first, because at the end of the round, he or she has to produce, right? And their first concern is how much is the profit that we can make on per hectare, because the holding sizes are very small in India, on an average about 1 hectare, right? Within 1 hectare, no matter what productivity you have of millets or pulses or oil seeds or even wheat and rice, you cannot make a family of five live on that, right? So unless you change from millets to grapes or dragon fruit or kiwis or something like that, exotic fruits and vegetables, you are not going to make more than 1 lakh of rupees in 4 months. The average income of a farmer in India, we estimated, hovers around 20,000 rupees per month. Average agriculture households, and the household size is about 4.6 people. Right now, in 20,000 rupees per month, they may not be in extreme poverty, but they are not very well off. Okay, so you have to think, unless their income goes up, you cannot have an industrial revolution in this country, because there has to be a demand from the masses. You and me cannot make the entire demand. How many cars you will buy, and how many air conditioners you will have, and how many fridges you will have. So the people, when the masses, their income goes up, that's how the multiplier effect in the economy goes up. Now, there are two ways. One is increasing the productivity, which we will need because we are the largest, most populous country on this planet. And our population by 2050 is going to be about 1.67 billion. So you cannot ignore the productivity impact. But when we increase productivity, can we avoid flood irrigation? How do we use sensors, as you are saying, AI to be used, precision farming to be used? which are the three crops that need to be set right? Rice, sugarcane, and wheat. They consume two-thirds of the water within agriculture. Okay. Rice needs 25 irrigations, anywhere 20 to 25 irrigations in places like Punjab, Haryana. Now, if you go for drip in rice, and there are experiments in Haryana going on for the last 10 years, Jan Irrigation is doing it. And in peer reviewed journals, the results have been published that 45 to 50% of water can be saved. But then who is interested in putting drip in rice in Punjab, Haryana, when water is free, power is free, everything is free? Who wants to put, they say, okay, you want to do this drip, that also you put free. So everything. So this freebie culture that has developed in India is killing India, because you cannot make a nation grow through these crumbs of freebies. Okay, as the prime minister said, Revdi culture. But then I think the challenge is right in front of him. Why is he giving free food to 800 million people when the poverty has come down to 5%? So walk the talk. Okay, Revdi culture needs to be rationalized. Those who are on the verge of extreme destitution and poverty, and yes, you take care of them. But why 800 million people cannot afford food in this country? At least start charging half the price of what the farmer's MSP is. That is what the Vajpayee formula was. Antodaya, you give free food, but those who are above that, they have to pay minimum 50%. And those who are better off, they have to pay 90% of the MSP. That will bring you at least 30, 40,000 crores you can save out of food subsidy. That you put in drip irrigation, that you put in sensors, that you put in AI in agriculture, because the future productivity and planet's resources, fertilizer, I give you one example. As I said, granular urea that is applied in the field, the plant is consuming only 35 to 40% of it. Rest is going in the environment. So nutrient use efficiency is 35 to 40%. In the drip, if you do fertigation, the nutrient use efficiency goes to 90%. And that nitrous oxide. So you are really making the same money go two times more in terms of productivity, in terms of use of that, and saving your water, saving your nitrous oxide, and saving your fertilizer subsidy. But soluble fertilizers, which go in fertigation, are not subsidized, and granular is subsidized. What is happening to our policymakers? So I think agriculture needs attention and not slogans. We need precision agriculture. Precision agriculture requires the use of technology and some resources. And this freebie culture needs to be minimized. Today, the biggest challenge of freebie culture is in food subsidy and fertilizer subsidy. If we can tackle this, I can write on the wall, the government will save on an average every year minimum 40,000 crores. 40,000 crores. That they may use it in defense on border, because given the situation around your borders, you will need to bump up your expenditure on defense. So you have to rationalize these policies. But here the question is, at least for the planet's concern, saving water, saving soil, saving air pollution, and saving biodiversity, all these things can be attained if we walk the talk in terms of reducing the Revdi culture to the minimum, and increasing the investments in precision agriculture to the maximum. If we can do this transition, but it's a political challenge. How do you do it? Because politicians love giving everything free. Unless the taxpayers wake up and ask for an accounting of their money, how you are using, because this free culture is nothing else. I consider it as a bribe for votes, and that's not. It's a vote bank. It's a bribe. That's not going. Let there be an independent committee and let them decide how many are vulnerable groups and what should be the level of subsidy, and that the center and the state should combine. There was Supreme Court, comments on that, and even the Vice President, Mr. Dhankar, you know, has been saying about some of these things. So I think the future of Indian agriculture and future of our agri-food space has to be rationalization, repurposing of these subsidies, and making the best use of the money that we have.
Absolutely. Otherwise, we are already facing several challenges, and the implications are only going to get more difficult from here. We discussed so many solutions. Of course, now the intent definitely is in question, which probably we can only wait and watch and see how things take its course. But another area which I feel is a gap for us is the awareness among farmers and farm laborers, because when we talk about AI to different sustainable practices, none of this will work if the farmers they don't know about it. Now, what I understand is that definitely there are several campaigns that the government is doing, several other stakeholders are doing. We have schemes like Krishi Darshan. I don't know how much attention that gets in today's time. Do you think there is a requirement for stronger programs at the national and state level to educate farmers and farm laborers about not just climate change, but also about all these newer technologies which will help them, have better productivity?
Sure. The natural process was the demonstration and the extension work that the extension workers used to do, agriculture extension. But agriculture extension over the last 2, 3 decades, I would say, if not died, it is the weakest link in the agri food chain. Some states had taken big steps in that direction and got very good results. I'll give you one example. In Gujarat, when Mr. Modi was the chief minister, that 13 years, the agriculture rate of growth in Gujarat was 9.2% per annum. 9.2% per annum was the agri GDP growth rate of Gujarat. One of the things that he did, for 1 month just before the Kharif season, he would launch a massive campaign called Krishi Mahotsav, and he would create 300 Krishi Raths, you know, trucks and all that, and all the agriculture machinery of the state will go to every village to demonstrate. So no agriculture scientist or will be in headquarters, they will be in the field showing to the farmers. So if farmers cannot come to Ahmedabad or Gandhinagar, these people need to go. And 300 Krishi Raths, he converted all these trucks into Raths, and he would kickstart. And I have, seen those how more than 1 lakh farmers, and he would address and then send all the scientists into the thing, each village. Now, at present, I'm so happy to see Mr. Shivraj Singh Chauhan, who is our agriculture minister. He just completed, I think from 27th of May to 12th of June, he was doing Padyatra, and he was going to various states of India and basically taking the lab to the land. And I saw even the Director General of ICAR, Mr. Jad. Dr. Jat, he was accompanying him in many of these padyatras and these meetings. The idea is the same. You have done your research in the lab, but how much of that is there in the land of the farmers? So, if the prime minister or the agriculture minister takes a lead, then naturally the scientists and other people will start going. And in my conversation with him, he made it very clear, Dr. Gulati, we have to take all the research of the scientists from the labs to the land because that's the communication gap, the weakest link. So I'm sure he would be evaluating what he heard from the farmers and what he has been hearing from the scientists. And if he can connect the two, it can be a wonderful thing. And you can use different types of techniques, not just padayatras, but also electronic and videos and whatnot to do that.
I think definitely that is one feedback we hear from several stakeholders, and it's an area that we have to definitely work, because if we don't educate them, if the information doesn't reach them, it will be of no use. All the research, all the policies. So I'll just ask this one question, which will be on sort of summarizing the policy and taking your input on what's next. So in your view, are the current agricultural policies equipped to deal with what the future holds with respect to climate, uh, fuel versus food debates that we keep doing? What new policy frameworks or interventions would you recommend to become more climate resilient, particularly for India, because we are most vulnerable when it comes to climate impact also? And what would be some top recommendations that you would give to government, private sector, or civil societies to work together to ensure that the impact reaches every farmer, including the smallholder farmers?
We have to first celebrate that we are not in a famine condition of the 1960s or even 70s. We have achieved food security in terms of availability of food. Challenge is increasing farmers' incomes, and general income levels need to go up. Good news is that the poverty has come down to 5% or so, as per the World Bank estimates, the way they are measuring extreme poverty globally. So that's a very heartening thing, so we must celebrate that. But when we were trying to achieve food security and reduce poverty, we neglected the impact of all the policies on nature, that is, soil, water, air, biodiversity, SWAP, what we call. I think we have to make the thing peasant positive, productivity positive, and also planet positive. Okay, productivity we will require that has to go up. We are still below the international standards in many of the crops. If we have to compete with countries like China, our productivity levels are still 30-40% below China's levels. So we can go, and China is a smallholder economy. So we need to find ways. So technology is one, precision agriculture is another, and then of course educating the farmers about that. But policies also cannot be neglected. The problem in India is that policies are not in tune with what we need. Next steps, as you said, we need better nutrition, we need better climate resilience, and we need better incomes of the farmers. And our policies, instead of focusing how to do these three things, are giving, out of about 5 lakh crores that are pumped in agri-food space from the central government budget. The budget is about 51 lakh crores. Out of that, 5 lakh crores is in the agri-food business. Food subsidy, fertilizer subsidy, these together are like 4 lakh crores. And then there is PM Kisan and so on and so forth, and other smaller subsidies of insurance subsidy, credit subsidy, all these things. You can easily save 40 to 50,000 crores out of this 5 lakh crores every year if you rationalize just these two subsidies, food and fertilizer, as I said earlier. To me, this is the two big elephants in the room of agri-food space. I'm not going there. There are wastages in others. There are leakages. About 20 to 25% of food leaks, and other fertilizer leaks to other, plywood industry, glass industry, even to neighboring countries, because our urea is the cheapest in the world. So there are leakages, misuse, or inefficient use. As I said, the nutrient use efficiency is only 35 to 40%. It can easily go up to 55, 60, 70%, if not 90% through precision agriculture. So I think it needs focus. We need not any more slogans, we need to act, and we need to reorient these policies. We don't need even more resources. Only it is reorienting the same resources, but it's a political call because policies are made in a political economy framework. And the prime minister and the agriculture minister, they need to communicate to the farmers that this change in policies, and I've written, even today's Indian Express carries that article where we are suggesting you move towards food coupons for fertilizer subsidy and give the freedom to buy 20 commodities which are more nutritious. So it's a electronic wallet, for the farmers. And similar thing you can do fertilizer coupons for the farmers. So if they want to use biofertilizers, or they want to do natural farming, or they want to buy chemical fertilizers, whether liquid or granular, and whether micronutrients which are being neglected. So I think all this, you have to deregulate the system of fertilizers and move to direct income support through food coupons and fertilizer coupons. And my bet is we'll save 40,000, 50,000 crores out of these two subsidies, and they can be used for your precision farming, AI, and all that new technologies, drone DDs that you talked about. And all these, technologies are coming, but our policy is not in line with those. That's where the problem is. I think it's late, or already overdue, and the wisdom lies in acting in time rather than reacting to a crisis. And we should not let that crisis hit us on the head and only then we'll wake up. That's not a good sign. I think it's high time. We have food surplus. We need not worry on that account. And if it takes for the new policies to stabilize within a year or two or three, and that challenge is the political challenge. And I hope this government can do it. That's what our wish and hope is.
So, beyond policies, markets and consumer choices are also increasingly shaping the future of farming. So, whether it is from the demand for biofuels to carbon capture markets and credits and new ways of using farmlands like developing agri photovoltaic, there's a lot of debate about what should take priority in a climate stressed world. What is your take on this? And even today, I know maybe we have moved beyond this, but I still hear a lot about food versus fuel debate. So what is your take on that?
Well, let's say first food versus fuel, and then we can take up the issue of agriphotovoltaics. Food versus fuel is a big debate globally also, because when US found that their corn prices were going below $100 a ton, and they decided to go for fuel and put 125 million tons of corn into biofuels. There was a big debate globally that the prices will go up and so on and so forth. It hasn't happened that much. Some marginal here and there effects are there. Uh, I would say, looking at which place it needs to be done. biofuel can be one way to increase the demand for agricultural products. Now, generation one, generation two, whether you do it from the grains or you do it from the sugarcane, earlier it was after producing the uh, sugar, you were allowed to go from the molasses and the fuel, but that policy was changed, and I'm very much comfortable with that policy. Uh, Nowadays, uh, FCI is giving rice to these distilleries to go for biofuel. That I'm not in agreement with, because the cost of rice to FCI today is 42 rupees a kg. And they want to give it to the distilleries at 25 rupees a kg because this is broken rice, this is unfit for human consumption. That means there's a lot of, you know, I don't want to say, but it's not a transparent system. Okay, so I'm against that. FCI giving rice to the distillery. If the distilleries want, let them buy from the open market and do the thing. I would also even allow them to import corn from US or anywhere else in the world directly and put it in that. Okay, so up to 20% blending, we can easily do it. Okay, so I don't think any food, we are already at, almost 15%, 16%, 17%. People are talking that blending is already, our target is 20%, because after 20%, you have to change the engines and whatnot. So I think it's a remarkable thing, from 3% to 15, 16, 17% we have already reached. And there's no food scarcity in the country, right? So this food versus fuel security, there is more hype than perhaps the reality on the ground. Agrivoltaics, agriphotovoltaics. This is a magic bullet. This is a magic bullet. Prime Minister had given the slogan of doubling farmers' income in 2016. He gave the slogan that by 2022-23 we would be able to double farmers' incomes. And we asked at that time that, are you thinking of nominal incomes or real incomes? And then he set up a committee which was headed by Ashok Gulati, our friend, and they produced, so many volumes of recommendations, and more than 3,000 pages of recommendations. Uh, and still, the actual achievement was not more than 50% of that, because raising productivity takes time. And either you do crop diversification towards high value agriculture, as I said, grapes or dragon fruits or kiwis and so on and so forth, but risk is very high in those. Okay, so unless a proper value chain is established, you cannot. But if you do towards that, then from staples to this, your income can go up 3 times, 4 times already. But agri-photovoltaic, you can have uh, the panels at about 10 to 12 feet high. And you can grow strawberries, you can grow potatoes, you can grow Karela, you can do all sorts of farming under that. So it's a dual use of land. And if you can change the policy that government will buy the surplus power from these farmers at the rate at which it is buying from the thermal plants, because you are trying to replace the thermal power with renewables. So if you are buying from the thermal plants at 4 rupees 15 paisa, 4 rupees 20 paisa or so per kilowatt hour, then if you give them this for the clean energy, then it is an economically viable proposition, and farmers' incomes can double within 6 months. Within 6 months. Then the change in the policy has to be that the banks have to give loans to the farmers, because it requires for 1 megawatt on about 4 to 5 acres, you need an investment of about 3.5 to 4 crores. Now, no bank is ready to give to the farmers 3.5 to 4 crores for agri photovoltaics. They normally give crop loans, which is 3 lakhs to 5 lakhs. Okay, so if they have to do this, they have to create a business model, they have to do the standardization that it's not on 100% of land, so that again, that otherwise energy versus food security concerns will come there too. So, but you can design it in a manner that there is enough sunlight coming down for the plants, and those plants can absorb the photosynthesis, and the productivity remains more or less the same. So, all those experiments, we created a pilot here in Ujjwa in Nazafgarh KVK, and some farmers are doing that. A very beginning, I would say, it's just starting, and this is a magic bullet, and this can double farmers' incomes, but it requires access to finance. Maybe some investors will have to be brought in, and a tripartite agreement between the farmer, the investor, the banker, and the discoms, because they have to buy it, and at what price they will have to buy. They want to compare it with solar parks of big players, Adanis or Mahindras or others who have created, and they are selling at 3 rupees, but that land is gone for 25 years. You can't do anything else on those lands. Here you are creating a double use of land, and it is an inclusive model. It is a people's movement. It is farmers' movement like the milk cooperatives. Okay, so I am very much on this. In fact, we recently had a roundtable on this issue also, and we feel that this is the way to go to get clean energy, augment farmers' income not by 5, 10, 15%, but double it. In fact, our calculations show farmers' incomes can go up to 5 to 10 times. 5 to 10 times the farmers' incomes can go, and still agriculture will be going on underneath. So there is no compromise on agriculture. In fact, if you are growing leafy vegetables or strawberries, their productivity improves. So wherever it can be done, but policy change that discoms have to buy the surplus power, and that pricing of the power has to be equivalent to at least the thermal power. And then, of course, there has to be investor and bankers have to give the loans for it, and farmer can have partial equity into that, and his land is there, because for 20, this is a 25 to 30-year venture. So you have to create a proper standard operating procedure for that. Okay, if they can do it, I would say this is the biggest thing in terms of augmenting farmers' income and in terms of giving clean energy to the country.
Absolutely, sir. I think that seems like a very promising solution we have discovered. But what I understand is definitely finance and more R&D needs to go into this. There has been a lot of talks about carbon markets and credits also as a way to incentivize farmers and cut emissions. But how we design these will be very crucial, especially to make sure that smallholder farmers also benefit. What's your take on this?
Carbon markets in some countries are already developed. In India, some voluntary carbon markets are initiated, I would say. It's just scratching the surface. Most polluting industries, for example, cement, steel, fertilizers, and others. Now it is coming from the pressure of industries which are polluting to buy carbon from other places where carbon can be reduced emissions. And farmers also create carbon emissions, but also they can do sequestration. Or if they can reduce their thing, how much, for example, rice. We estimated that rice cultivation in Punjab, per hectare, there is a 5 ton per hectare of carbon equivalence that is created in rice cultivation from methane, nitrous oxide, and carbon dioxide. Now, if they change the practice, right? If they change the practice and they bring it down, that flooding will not be there and nitrous oxide cannot be, we'll use soluble fertilizers and so on and so forth. And if they bring it down to, let's say, 3 tons rather than 5 tons per hectare. So, for that 2 tons of saving of the greenhouse gas emission carbon equivalents, what is the price you are giving? That is the issue. So, if that price, in the US market, they are talking of at least $50 a ton to $100 a ton. In India, we are still talking 10, 12, $15. At $10 a ton, nobody is interested. So, what little research that we have done, a minimum price has to be $30 a ton. So, $30 a ton, if you put in the Indian case, then some farmers will change their practice to get that. But it has to be verified, it has to be certified. There is a system that needs to be put in place. Okay. Now, all these things, government is aware of it, but they are lagging behind, and some voluntary players in the private sector are going ahead. And in fact, they are joining hands with some of the companies in the West. And I've seen, I can show you the rice, which is branded as low carbon rice, and they are doing it. Yeah.
So while policy and markets are vital, real resilience often comes from the ground up. Local communities, farmer groups, and the next generation of growers will shape the future of our food system. So, before we wrap up, sir, I would like to ask you, what role do you see for grassroots initiatives and farmer led solutions in building climate resilient agriculture in India, especially when so many young people are moving away from farming? How can we inspire and inspire them and provide them with an incentive so that they take up this as a profession, perhaps make it more sustainable and join hands to make agriculture practices future ready?
Well, one thing you should be clear about that today, 46% of our workforce is engaged in agriculture. It should not be more than 30%. So there is a huge extra labor sitting in agriculture because they don't have much outside agriculture. Okay, people have to move out of agriculture. In the developed world, 2%, 3%, 4% of the workforce works in agriculture. You take the case of US or much of the Europe, it's less than 5% everywhere of the workforce. And still they can feed themselves, they can export and all that. The problem in India is the smallholder. Okay. So if we have to turn around that, and they are not going to go away because our off farm activity is not increasing at that pace. You know which is the second biggest employer? The second biggest employer is textiles, 45 million people. Okay. Can they come there from agriculture to textiles and garments? What is the story on the garments front? Of the global share, India's share was 3% in 2000, and it is the same, roughly 2.8% in 2024. In 25 years, our share in the global exports of garment has remained constant. Whereas a country like Bangladesh next door, their share has gone from 2% to 9.8%. Vietnam, 1% to 6%. So they have succeeded in capturing global markets, and we have not. This is where more productive employment can be generated. So we need to skill them, we need to create conditions for them so that all these garment parks that can be created, we have huge labor force which can be working and capturing the global market. because the global market gives them good pricing. Okay, if within the home we can get good pricing, well and good, but normally you need for better pricing. That's why you export. That's the whole game. So the issue is you should not worry, oh, people are not ready to work in agriculture and therefore agriculture will starve. No. Okay, lesser people, then the average holding size will start increasing. In China, they allowed the lease markets for 30 years. They can lease it out even to corporates. In most of our states, land lease market is not allowed. So you want to keep the small as small. This is like small scale reservation in the industry. We need to liberate the system. We need to start with land lease markets to be open, and then you go and see whether the Land Ceiling Act, this country has a Land Ceiling Act. It's a philosophy of the 1950s and 60s when we were more a socialist economy. But you have to create jobs, and jobs will not be in agriculture. They will be created outside agriculture. And people need to move out into construction industry, into garment industry, into all sorts of other services. And for that, skill formation will be a critical thing, because if you move to higher productivity jobs, the skills have to be there. Otherwise, you will become and come in Delhi from Bihar or UP or other places. Bihar is supplying labor to the rest of India, literally. And all the tea shacks and this and that, but that's not very high productivity jobs. So you need to skill this labor force. So this so-called demographic dividend will be there only when they are skilled, and we need to invest in that skilling. Okay, and you were talking about new technologies, but new technologies, who is going to drive it and who is going to adopt it? You need skills for that. Okay, so if you can do these things, then I'm sure you can increase farmers' incomes, and only those who are really interested in farming. In the same 1 hectare, I have seen people earning in Punjab, even in Punjab, a rice farmer. He makes about a lakh of rupees per hectare. I went in another district in Punjab. A Punjabi farmer was growing dragon fruits and watermelons. And
Two of
he's
my
made,
friends actually left their jobs and started growing dragon fruits, and I think they're now richer than any one of us.
so, and he had two John Deere tractors which are air conditioned. So, I mean, I know friends in Punjab, person who is the potato king of India. He has more than 160 tractors. And he's doing, and he says, wheat rice? No way, wheat and rice. What is that? What will that give me? But then the majority is fallen into that, and all the Bihar labor and UP labor comes and does their job. So same farmer, same land can change his cropping pattern and get 4 times more, 5 times more. But it will require more working capital. There'll be a bit of higher risk. I went to a Karela farmer, the bitter gourd, and he said, साहब इस बार ही ठीक नहीं चला क्योंकि 11 रुपए किलो मेरा करेला बिक रहा है तो market has crashed. So, but that's where you have to find the export markets in the Gulf. Just fly it out from Punjab to the Gulf. The Gulf cannot produce anything, and Punjab can produce everything. So all the vegetables, fruits, and all this, you have special trade agreements with the Gulf countries. You are good in relations with those countries. So you need to get the access to those lucrative markets, help the farmer switch away from these, especially rice. We have too much of rice, and it's not good for the planet. That's our own water and soil and air. So I think we need to do more biodiversity, that is crop diversity. It will be good for the soil, and it will be good for the farmers because it will give them 4 times higher incomes. But then you have to create a strategy and act on that. Now, center says it's a state's responsibility. State looks towards the centers. The state is giving everything free. Where is the money to do all this? Power subsidy in Punjab is making the finances of Punjab government totally. If there is one state that will fail financially first, it will be Punjab, and it is all these types of revenue culture that cannot go on like that.
Sir, one final comment from you, or rather advice for the younger generations, for the youth, to remind them of their individual role when we talk about climate sustainability, not just from an agricultural point of view, but generally also. What can we do? Because I think you will agree with me that oftentimes we get into this notion that सरकार कुछ करेगी, इंडस्ट्री कुछ कर लेगा, सब कोई सब कुछ कर लेगा, लेकिन मैं क्या करूँगी मुझे पता नहीं है, या मुझे मैं क्या ही कर सकती हूँ? सो फॉर देम।
Well, everybody wants higher income, right? Government has to create conditions and the policies which can ensure people move up the economic ladder, but also take care of the environment, the lifestyle. And this message has to resonate from the top because it goes very quickly. So I'm happy the Prime Minister did talk about the lifestyle, and he keeps on those lines. But I think much more priority at a state level, which are nearer the chief ministers and others, also need to do this. Uh, Center can devise policies. For example, Haryana state, which is facing dire crisis of water, announced that they will give 17,500 rupees to those farmers per hectare who will switch away from paddy to pulses or others, or even if they keep the land fallow. Why can't the center also say we will add up that and make it 35,000? So 50-50 share, 17,500 the state will give and 17,500 the center will give. I can bet at 35,000 rupees per hectare, if the farmer gets every year, because you are saving permanently the water and electricity bill of the state, the subsidy bill, and the fertilizer subsidy bill, you are saving on that. The center is saving fertilizer subsidy, and the state will save the power subsidy. And you say for the next 5 years, 10 years, we are committed to do this every year, not only once. Okay, otherwise next year again his income goes down. So say that for next 10 years we will give you that because we are saving on fertilizer subsidy and power subsidy, and that we will give you this, but you please shift from rice to pulses or oil seeds because we are both importing these. Pulses are being imported, oil seeds are being imported, in a way edible oil, and that will be good for the soil because they are both nitrogen fixing and they don't need that much water. Their 2 3 irrigations are fine, whereas paddy needs 22 irrigations. So you can do it if you want to do it, but when will the center wake up? Oh, center is concerned. I did talk to the authorities at the center, and they said, "Oh, if we do it for Punjab and Haryana, farmers from all over the country will start demanding. Why don't you?" I said, "Okay, give it to them. If the state is giving 50%, you say all the states who are ready to give, because you are doing too much paddy cultivation, and that's coming from the subsidy. Either you rationalize the subsidy, people will automatically get away, or you give the same incentive to pulses and oilseed growers, the crop neutral incentive structure. So it's all a matter of policies. If you do it, you can augment farmers' incomes and you can also save the planet.
Thank you so much, sir. I think
Okay.
this was a very insightful discussion, and definitely there are several areas that all of us have to, work towards. And I feel that it's not just governments and policymakers and other stakeholders, but we also need to be aware and ask the right questions, so that the government is accountable, or others are accountable. So, yeah, thank you so much, sir, for making the
Thank
time.
you. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.
That's a wrap on today's episode of She Talks Green. I hope this conversation gave you a deeper sense of just how closely our food, our farmers, and our future are tied to the climate crisis, and why it matters to all of us, not just those in the fields. If you found this episode valuable, do hit the subscribe button and share it with your friends. Until next time, stay curious, talk green, and take care.